Hey, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're watching this from. Very happy new year to you and your family. I hope 2021 turns out to be everything that you dreamt 2020 could be. With that being said, welcome to my channel. I am very excited to have all of you here. This is the first video I'm posting, so please bear with some of the subpar camera angles or any editing or audio issues that I may run into. I promise I will work on them and correct them as I post more videos. Moving on, recently picked up a hobby which is woodworking, and I've done a couple of projects around the house and I've learned a great deal from them. And today I wanted to show you something that was very simple at the same time very practical. What I mean by practical is in the day and age that we are in, many of us, including myself, I'm from the IT industry, are working in work from home situations, and I realized that we could save a lot of space on our work desk and make it much more work friendly and declutter it if we decided to get one of these. This is a vertical laptop docking station, and that is what we are going to build today. I also said that this build is going to be very simple. What I meant by that is I'm going to be completely using just a scrap piece of plywood that I found lying around in my house from one of my other projects, and all the other materials that are going to go into this build are very inexpensive. I will post a list of everything that I used for this build towards the end of the video so that you can estimate how much it would cost and build one for yourself too. Before we get into the video, however, I want to call out two disclaimers here. The first one is YouTube is not really a mainstream thing for me, so I don't really have any filming space or filming equipment or even a workspace to build the project in. I am operating entirely out of my house, and in fact we are filming this video in my living room. So most of the footage that you're going to see beyond this point have been shot on my phone, and hence they will have a vertical aspect ratio, and I hope most of you don't mind that. But if you find that inconvenient, I apologize in advance, and I'll make sure that it doesn't happen going forward. The second thing I would like to point out is that I am very comfortable presenting most of the things in English, and so I think it will also reach a wider audience that way, and so I'm going to be just using English throughout the video. Thank you for watching. Now let's get into the video. This is all the material that I'm going to be using to build this stand out of. This is a piece of scrap plywood that came out from one of my other projects, and it sort of measures 14 inches in length and about 3.5 inches in width, and this is all the material that I'm going to be using for this build. So ideally what we're going to do is, since this is about 14 inches in length, we're going to split it down the middle and have 7 inches and 7 inches these sides, and this 7 inches could be the base, and these 7 inches I could again split it down the middle like this and have two 7-inch pieces that could act as the sides of the laptop stand, right? And so this is the laptop that we are looking to mount. This is a HP Pavilion gaming laptop, and that's why it has all these angular cuts in it. And I want the laptop dock to be covering just this portion of it, because these are the ventilations for the laptop, and I want them to be out in the open. And as a fortunate coincidence, when I tried to measure it, I realized that this was exactly 7 inches in length, so it's going to be perfect for our stand. Here you see me draw a center point here so that I can rip the board down this way, so that I get two 7-inch long pieces, and then flip it on its side and mark the center here, so that I can draw a line through the center point this way and get two 7-inch long and 1.75-inch wide pieces, which is going to form the base and the walls of the dock. Once the cut has been done, this is what you end up with. You see three pieces here, one for the base and two for the walls of the dock. Once you arrange them in this way, and presto, you have the base structure ready for your dock. And now it's time to get the approval of the most important person in this build. This is my project manager Zoe, and looks like she's liking it, guys. She seems genuinely excited for it. She even gives me a high five here. Next, we're going to move on to sanding the piece. As you can see here, you can either sand directly using a sandpaper, or if you have one handy, use an orbital sander to make quick work of these. Another thing you can do is wrap a piece of sandpaper around a sanding block or a block of plywood, so that your sanding is off a straight plane and that you don't have any unevenly sanded edges. Earlier in the video, you might have noticed that the piece of plywood we are using is very dirty from all the glue and grime that stuck onto it from the previous project it was involved in. But you don't have to worry about that, since all the sanding and the cleaning afterwards will take away all the dirt and the grime, and will leave us the piece in a great condition to work with for this project. Now we've sanded down all the pieces and all the edges so that we have perfectly clean pieces. At the same time, I have even rounded off the corners so that they are very comfortable to work with. Hey guys, hope you're liking the video so far. I ran into two problems that I had to address during this project. One was that the rectangular pieces that make the wall of the dock are too small to be cut using a circular saw, and so I had to use a handsaw to cut them, right? And handsaw, the problem with using a handsaw is that you don't get perfect control while cutting, and so you tend to get jagged edges. And if you take a look at this picture, you'll notice that both the pieces were cut in a way where both of them have an edge that was overlapping, right? And so it looked very out of place, and in order to fix this, I just thought of a solution on the go. So from another project that I was working on, I used a circular saw to trim the edges of a piece of plywood that I was working on, and the trims from those were lying around. It sort of looks like this. It's a very thin layer of plywood. What I did was I just took a piece of this and then I attached it to the place where the wood was missing in each of those pieces. I'll show it to you in a bit. After that, the second problem I had to address was preventing my laptop from getting scratched, right? So every time I use the dock, if it was just bare wood inside the dock, then what would happen is it will tend to scratch my laptop over time. So in order to work around this, what I did was I went down to my local hardware store and got this, right? This is a very simple rubber gasket or rubber washer that they would say, and this is really cheap, right? So I got this whole rectangle for about 40 rupees, and this is about probably 1 feet in length, almost, and about half a feet of width, I suppose. And so this is about 40 rupees, and what I did was I just to cut two pieces, almost the size of my rectangles that make up the wall of the dock, and I just glued them to the pieces using Fevicol. So guys, this is the final piece of wood that I'm going to be using. So I've sanded out everything using 80 and 150 grit sandpaper, and I've even rounded off the edges so that it feels soft to the touch. So the problem I was talking about while using a handsaw was that I cut up until this point with perfect control, but this point sort of got jagged because I didn't have enough space to cut it properly. So what happened is it took a turn this way and then sort of took off more wood than I was expecting. So what I did was I took a piece of that trimmed edge plywood and then I just attached it here using some SH Fevicol, which is a specific type of Fevicol used for bonding wood together. It's very strong, and but you see that the seams are still a bit visible in this part and in this part. So what I'll be doing next is using some wood filler to cover up these areas and then sanding it down using sandpaper so that they don't show up stand out as much as they are doing right now. The second problem I was talking about was the rubber gasket, which I have attached in this piece using the same Fevicol. After sanding this piece of this surface out, what happens is it creates a rough edge which is used for the glue to bond together with this. So now that this is also done, you notice that there is a small area left on this side for not being covered by the rubber gasket. That is because when I'm using the stand like this, when I'm the bottom piece also needs to have some form of rubber insulation, and this is quite thick. So what I'll be doing is I'll be applying a piece of insulation this way on the bottom piece as well, so that this space gets covered as well. For closing the seams and smoothing out the edges of the project, we need to use some wood filler. I don't have any, so I'll be using chalk powder. This is a very useful alternative found in any hardware store nearby. You have to mix this with some water and the color of the paint that you're going to be using on your project. If you don't have any paint, that's still fine. You can also use some sanding sealer to make the bond even better for the chalk powder. You have to use a surface, as you see here, to mix the chalk powder in. It's going to get messy, so make sure that you have a surface that you can sacrifice later on. And always wear protective gloves so that you make the mess a little less. Start by pouring the chalk powder onto the work surface you're going to be using and then getting a plastic putty knife. If you don't have one, you can always use your own credit card. Pour some water onto it and then start mixing as you see on the screen. Perhaps around this time, you can pour a little of the paint that you're going to be using in your project so that the filler you're going to be getting matches your project and blends in easily. You can also use some sanding sealer to make the bond a bit more efficient, but since this is a small project, I felt it was a bit too much. Continue mixing it until you get to a consistency that's almost like a dry paste. Mind you, chalk powder mixture dries out fairly quickly, and so you have to be very quick about mixing it and then applying it onto your workpiece. I have applied the chalk powder mixture to both the pieces, as you can see here. I've even filled the gaps as much as I can without overdoing it and smoothened it out everywhere else I've applied the paste. Usually, chalk powder takes about an hour to dry, but since the weather is a bit cold and humid, I think it's going to take a bit longer, so I'm going to wait at least 2 hours before I can work on these. Now that the filler is dry, I can start sanding it. I'll be using a 150 grit sandpaper, but 220 grit should be more than enough for this. By this time, I had decided to paint my project white, so I went down to my local hardware store and got a can of white wood primer. I also got a can of white emulsion paint and a roll of edge banding that I'll be using. As always, wear some protective gloves and have a disposable work area because painting can get very messy very fast. Use a paint stick or a piece of plywood to start mixing the primer and keep mixing it until all the solid substance at the bottom dissolves into the primer and becomes as thick as it possibly can. As you can see here, I have applied the first coat of primer. It is rather a thin coat that I have applied on all three pieces. I'll wait for it to dry and then I'll be using 220 grit sandpaper to sand all of this down and then apply another coat of thicker primer onto it. And after the second coat also dries, I will sand that down too and then apply the paint on top of that. So after my second coat of primer had dried, I had applied 2 coats of paint onto the pieces with some light sanding with some 220 grit sandpaper in between the coats. Once the paint has dried, this is how it's going to look. This is the edge banding that we'll be using in this project, guys, and it's fairly easily available in most of your hardware stores. I picked this color because I felt it would go well with the white background. It's a very simple process to apply these. Apply glue along these edges and then cut the pieces to length and just stick them there and apply some form of clamping pressure until the glue cures enough to hold the pieces together. Wait at least 24 hours until the glue cures entirely so that the pieces are firmly stuck to these edges. Here are all the pieces that I'll be needing, cut down to length, just simply using a pair of scissors. Just a small tip for you guys, if you don't have a clamp that can hold these down together, then use this. This is a masking tape that is easily available in any hardware store. Wrap it around as much as you can, as tight as you can, and it'll hold them down with enough clamping pressure. And it does not leave any residue while being peeled off, so you don't have to worry about it affecting the look of your project as well. Wrap it around like this and you're good to go. Now that the glue has been given enough time to cure, the edge banding has fairly bonded to the sides of the workpiece. You notice that there is a small bit protruding out, however. This is because the width of the edge band is slightly more than the thickness of the plywood. You can simply remove this by using a sharp knife like this and angling it towards the workpiece so that you don't remove more than what is necessary. Hey guys, hope you've been liking the video so far, and I decided to put it all together, and what you see here is the final piece that came out. Guys, in my opinion, it looks much better than what I was expecting. I really like the finish. The brown goes very well with the white. It's a very contrasty look, and to think that all this came from that scrap piece of plywood is amazing. I've even laid down the rubber on the bottom here, and this piece of rubber was what I was using to measure the width of the laptop so that I knew how far away from each other I have to place these two pieces. And once I had that down, I used a G clamp or a C clamp to hold them in place in this fashion, and then I drove 6 pilot holes from the bottom and drove 1-inch screws through them to fasten these two together. And in my opinion, for a project like this method of fastening is more than enough, because this piece is not going to be subjected to any form of heavy load or duress at any point. All it's going to be doing is sitting on my table and holding my laptop. so I don't think any complex method of fastening is required for this. Let's test it out, guys. Let's just bring my laptop here. And yeah, so this is my laptop, guys. It's a relatively thick laptop, it's a heavy laptop as well, and the hinges come on this side, so let's try it out. So guys, I think it works really well. It's holding my laptop quite firmly. The rubber is doing its job. It's not letting the laptop slip up a lot, and it's also at the same time protecting the laptop from any scratches. And yeah, overall I think it's a really snug fit. And so guys, I really hope you liked this video and the piece that came out of it. I will be including more shots of this piece at the end of the video, so keep watching if you're interested. I really hope this video inspired at least one of you to go out and try some DIY at some point in your life. Yep, so like the video, share it with people who you think are good at DIY, or who you think should try this out. And yeah, leave a comment down below. This is my first video, so I really have no experience editing videos or filming them, so to speak. So if you have some tips or pointers for me, all I'm doing is from my phone. So if you have some tips or pointers for me, drop them down in the comments, or if you have some suggestions as to what I should try next, you can drop those too. Thank you for watching.